From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Monday, November 10, 2025. The family court judge whose landmark ruling made puberty blockers more accessible to gender dysphoric children says she now has doubts about her decision. In 2013, former Family Court Chief Justice Diana Bryant accepted expert evidence puberty blockers were a safe and reversible option. But now she believes it's up to parliaments to put regulations in place rather than relying on disputes before the courts. Another day, another data hack, and this time, the Australian Defence Force is at the centre of the breach. Blueprints for high-tech fighting vehicles might have been delivered into the hands of adversaries who could use them to develop effective countermeasures. Those exclusive stories are live right now at theaustralian.com.au. The Liberal Party is bitterly divided between those who believe they can save net zero and those who wish it dead and buried. They'll meet in Canberra this week to decide on their policy once and for all, and Sussan Ley's leadership hangs in the balance. That's today's episode.
Well, I will do the right thing, but my view is that we won't get to that because I don't believe that my colleagues want Australia to be ranked with those baddies.
This is the opposition housing spokesman Andrew Bragg on the ABC's Insiders program on Sunday. He's talking about the issue that's tearing the coalition apart, net zero. And he says Australia will be in some pretty dicey company if his party abandons an emissions reduction scheme.
I don't think we can give up on it. Our policy has to be to make it actually work. I think we're all in leadership roles and it's important that we don't give up on things that are hard.
But what would you do?
Well, I don't imagine that Australia is going to be in a grouping with Azerbaijan, Iran and Syria.
Andrew Bragg is a believer in net zero. He and his fellow moderates want the Liberals to commit to a plan that would help us reach net zero emissions in the second half of this century. The goal is to remove as much greenhouse gas from the Earth's atmosphere as we produce by transitioning to renewables and investing in reforestation and carbon capture and storage. But some of Bragg's Liberal Party colleagues, like Senator Sarah Henderson, don't want to hear about it.
I strongly believe that we need to resolve our position very, very quickly. As it's, I think, well known, I vehemently oppose net zero in all of its guises. It's sending our country backwards. It's causing enormous environmental and economic harm, and the Nationals have done a...
They'll convene at a special party room meeting in Canberra on Wednesday to thrash it out.
So at the moment, we're debating the interpretation of the Paris Agreement and whether to retain two words in the policy platform.
Greg Brown is The Australian's chief political correspondent.
In many ways, it's the fight they had to have. It was the fight they really had to have in the last term after they lost in 2022, and they ended up not having any debates really, which I think was a big mistake. And then they papered over all their divisions with the nuclear policy, if you remember. So that was something that the whole party agreed with, so they just put aside the divisions on net zero by 2050, and they all got behind this nuclear agenda that they had. So really it's coming to a head in a way that it is uglier than it needed to be because it's had that waiting time, and also the party's being led by a leader who only just won a ballot. There is a lot of anger within the moderate faction, the supporters of Sussan Ley, about her handling of this issue. They think that she could have come out very quickly, similar to what she's done with tax cuts, and said, we will retain net zero under my leadership, but not at any cost, and we'll look at exactly how that will manifest itself. But by leaving it completely open, they think that it allowed the anti-net zero forces to gain momentum and get it to a stage where it's a very good chance of being dumped. What we're reporting in the paper on Monday is that the moderates are proposing a way to keep net zero, which is net zero the Australian way, which would not link net zero to a timeline and would be very much about pragmatism and getting more gas out of the ground and a technology agnostic approach, and get a sense of patriotism to it, that we're not just going to go to net zero for the reasons of Paris and the international community just for the sake of it, that we will do it the Australian way. But there is a view from Conservatives that this argument has just been put too late. And basically the party room, according to what the Conservatives are saying, the party room has pretty well coalesced around a decision to drop net zero.
Andrew Bragg said on Sunday he wouldn't abandon his principles if his party abandons net zero or agrees to leave the Paris Agreement. It's an international agreement signed by Australia just under a decade ago to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius by reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
So he's saying he'll quit the front bench. The question was put to him about retaining net zero and leaving Paris, and it feels like he grabbed onto the Paris element of that and said, yeah, sure, I'll leave the front bench if that's the case. But I think there's a legitimate interpretation that he was asked about net zero as well, and he said, sure. I think there is still a question about whether they come out, they stay in Paris, but they drop net zero, whether he does leave altogether. But certainly there is a fierce battle being played by the likes of himself, Dave Sharma, and other leading moderates who are working very hard behind the scenes to keep net zero going. And I think a real blow for them is it's not just some of the leading Conservatives who were open to net zero who have now shifted. People like James Paterson and Angus Taylor, they shifted their support away from net zero. It's also some of the key power brokers that are crucial for Sussan Ley's leadership who are not in that faction. So you've got Alex Hawke from the centre-right, and then you've got James McGrath, who's from the centrist faction in Queensland. So the fact that it's multi-factional now, I think, is a bigger problem for the moderates.
Yeah, you've written for The Australian that Andrew Bragg is a key supporter of Sussan Ley's. What does the future hold for her if she can't hold on to the people who do back her, much less the people who don't?
Well, I think this is a crucial question because some in the moderates are worried that not only will they lose net zero, but if they then cause too much havoc for Sussan Ley, then they lose a leader who's typically sympathetic to them as well, and all they end up with is no net zero and Angus Taylor as leader. Whether the moderates pull their support to it altogether, I think is unlikely. However, I think no matter how this goes on Wednesday, Sussan Ley's leadership will face significant strain. It's already under a lot of strain, and I think the Conservatives are threatening mayhem if there's any retention at all, even in a vague way, of net zero. So I think she's got a lot of tough days ahead.
Coming up, does the Conservative math on net zero add up? Senator Sarah Henderson said on Friday the opposition's support of net zero has hurt them in the last few elections. She's been one of the vocal advocates of dumping net zero policy going into Wednesday's meeting. But the Climate 200-backed Teal independents have gone from strength to strength in that same time. So does what she is saying ring true? Are Australian voters genuinely going to accept a no net zero position from either party?
Well, it's difficult to reconcile what people like Sarah Henderson and Andrew Hastie and Jacinta Price say based on the results from 2022 and 2025 and the rise of the Teals and all that. However, looking forward, there is globally a change in sentiment around this issue. The OECD put out a report just on Friday showing that there has been a slowdown in global action on climate. We've seen Donald Trump pull out of Paris. We're seeing anti-net zero parties doing very well in the polls. Nigel Farage is doing well in the polls in Britain, and the Conservative Party have dumped their commitment to net zero altogether. So I think moving forward, there are plenty of political headaches potentially in dropping net zero, but closer to the next election, 2028, it will become increasingly clear, I think, that Australia will not meet its 2030 target, and the transition will continue to be messy. What that means for power prices, I think, is they're probably going to keep going up as well. And that will leave, I think, the coalition with a very clear argument that Labor's committed to net zero, but it's not hitting any of its targets. All it means is a lot of expense for voters. We will do it another way. While there is risk politically in it, I can see a pathway to success, but I think it pretty much means it's very difficult to win back those old blue ribbon seats in Melbourne and Sydney.
And after Wednesday, what then?
I just think they need to get this resolved before Christmas. They can't see this bloodletting go on into next year, and they need to start putting the pressure back on the government. And the government, their 2035 target landed pretty well, really. It's a big range, 62 to 70%. But as I said, the difficulties for the government in this will actually be delivering on it. And that's where there will be pressure for Labor. So at the moment, it looks like Labor's in a pretty unassailable position. But when you look at both this issue, the budget, the economy, I think if the Libs can sort this out and then act with relative stability going on into next year, I think there are opportunities to land some blows on the government.
Greg Brown is the Australian's chief political correspondent. You can check out his reporting and analysis right now at theaustralian.com.au.